known for his strong opinions and unapologetic personality. Carlos King, the well-known face behind the popular reality TV show Love and Marriage Huntsville Lamb, has found himself at the center of a storm after a series of explosive tweets targeting his cast members, especially the women, set social media on fire. His criticism of the show's women, whom he claimed had become too dramatic, began with a tweet that many considered not just controversial but downright disrespectful and too challenging to work with. His remarks swiftly turned from simple annoyance to accusations that verged on personal assaults, leaving both fans and cast members in disbelief. This was especially true considering the reputation Carlos has established as a producer who takes pride in Lamb's success. The backlash was swift, with countless fans, critics, and even other reality TV stars taking to social media to vent their rage. Twitter in particular became a battleground as users flooded the platform with responses. Many denounced Carlos's treatment of the women on the show, pointing out his alleged manipulation tactics and his failure to treat them with the respect they deserve. However, the public wasn't the only ones who took notice. The cast of La MH also had a lot to say. One of the most outspoken responses was from Melody, who has long been a central figure on the show. Melody, who has experienced her own struggles with Carlos, made it clear that she would not tolerate Carlos's tweets. The shockwave from these early reactions only got louder as it became clear that this wasn't just a behind-the-scenes issue, it was now out in the open, and everyone had a side to take. However, this is where the drama didn't end with the tweets. Tisha, another important cast member, joined the chorus, sharing her experiences working with Carlos and how difficult it was to be treated unfairly by someone who was supposed to be a collaborator. The agreement has now sparked a full-blown controversy that could have long-term effects on Carlos King fans, who are already tired of the dramatized storylines and Carlos's role in shaping them. They started to wonder if he was really interested in the women's stories, growth, and struggles, or if he was just using them as pawns in a game to increase ratings. The discussion swiftly shifted from personal animosity to a more general discussion about how African American women are treated on reality TV. As the public's outrage grew, the hashtag boycott Carlos King began trending on Twitter. Fans weren't content to just vent their frustration, they wanted action, and it was evident that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of outrage. People were genuinely concerned about the cast's treatment and were supporting them. You won't believe the intensity of the response as the public's anger intensified. Carlos King faced two options as the controversy grew. Either he would back down and apologize for his remarks, or he would double down and risk losing not only his fans, but also the cast's trust and his role in the series. The most absurd thing is that, in spite of the firestorm of backlash, Carlos remained defiant on social media, continuing to defend his actions and make remarks that only serve to fan the flames of controversy. What makes this story so compelling is that it's not just about a man's feud with his co-stars, rather, it's about the bigger issues of respect, accountability, and the complicated relationships between producers and reality stars. As this drama plays out, everyone is wondering if Carlos King will be held accountable for his actions or if he will continue to rule the LMH landscape. Time will tell. But for the time being, the World is the Love and Marriage Huntsville cast found themselves in the spotlight after Carlos King's controversial tweets, and the stakes are higher than ever. After what began as simmering tension between Carlos and his cast members turned into full-fledged drama, the cast was forced to confront the issue head-on, and their responses not only illuminated the personal dynamics behind the scenes, but also demonstrated how deeply Carlos's actions are the first to have affected them. Melody, one of the main characters on the show, has a complicated relationship with Carlos and is accustomed to being at the center of the drama, but she also values respect. After witnessing Carlos's public remarks about her and the other women on the show, Melody didn't hold back in a series of strong social media posts, making it clear that Carlos's treatment of the women was unacceptable and calling out his attempts to manipulate situations. Melody made it clear that she would no longer keep quiet about standing up for herself and her fellow cast members for the sake of ratings. But what really escalated the situation was her direct challenge to Carlos's authority. For her, This was about more than just the show's drama. It was about her personal life. Her message was straightforward. She wouldn't allow Carlos to denigrate her or anyone else for his own benefit. The intensity of her words struck a chord with many fans, who praised her for speaking out against what they perceived as and what really resonated with fans was the way Tisha framed the situation. She wasn't just defending herself, she was speaking out for all the women on the show who had been mistreated enough. She said, calling for respect not just for herself. Unfair power. Dynamic Tisha and Al joined in on the conversation, echoing Melody's frustration while adding her own perspective. Tisha had previously been the target of some of Carlos's scathing remarks. However, Tisha's response demonstrated a level of unity and strength among the cast that was difficult to overlook. It wasn't just a personal matter, rather, it was a fight for respect and dignity, and fans supported her. This is where things get interesting though, because as the situation progressed, the Lamb family members realized that their power lay in numbers, and the more they spoke out, the more supporters and followers came together to support them. Starting a movement of this collective voice started to change the narrative surrounding Carlos King from being about one man's controversial tweets to being about the strength and solidarity of the women who refused to allow themselves to be treated unfairly. The cast had previously been seen as a collection of individuals thrown together for a reality TV show, but in this moment of shared adversity, they were united as a team. What distinguishes this story from typical reality show drama, though, is the underlying issue of race. Fans and critics alike began to question how African American women are frequently portrayed in reality TV shows, especially in a show like Love and Marriage Huntsville, where Carlos's actions were seen as the culmination of a pattern of mistreatment. The conversation swiftly moved from personal grievances to a broader discussion about systemic issues in the entertainment industry. The women of LAM weren't just fighting for their own dignity, they were fighting for something much larger. The cast members weren't just speaking out on social media as the storm raged, they were also demanding change. Their responses weren't just emotional, they were calculated, demonstrating that they would no longer tolerate their lives and experiences being used for entertainment purposes. The shocking thing is that this drama won't simply go away. The conversation it has sparked has already gained momentum and is sending waves that could change in an attempt to defend himself. Carlos King has remained defiant in the current reality TV landscape, posting cryptic messages on social media. However, the more he responds, the more he alienates the very audience that initially made Love and Marriage Huntsville a hit. Fans are beginning to wonder if Carlos will be able to salvage his reputation or if this is the beginning of the end for his reign as a reality TV mogul. What's even more bizarre is that no one saw this coming, as it began as a dispute between a producer and the future of Lamb is now in doubt, and the next course of events will not only decide Carlos's future, but also the future of reality TV shows that focus on African American experiences. Destiny has taken an unexpected turn, and now everyone is waiting to see how the story plays out. The controversy surrounding Carlos King's treatment of the Love and Marriage Huntsville cast members sparked more than just drama on the set. It ignited a massive firestorm. The viewers who had followed these women's journeys from the beginning were equally horrified by Carlos's actions, which began as an internal cast dispute but swiftly turned into a public outcry with fans swarming social media platforms with support for Melody Tisha and the other women on the show. The tone of the backlash was one of solidarity, with fans expressing their anger over the way African American women had been treated on reality TV shows generally, and Carlos's treatment of the Lamb cast specifically. But here's where it gets interesting. The fans weren't just upset, they were actively retaliating. Social media turned into a battlefield for those who stood up for the women of Lamb, as supporters bombarded Carlos's social media pages with hashtags like #6Justice4L and support the women of Lamb, demanding that the network take a stand against the power. Unquestionably, the fan base grew from a few sporadic remarks, swiftly grew into a full movement, and the trend spread nationwide, headlines that attract notice from those who are not L fans. The depth of the discussion this story sparked sets it apart from other reality TV controversies. It was not just about drama between a producer and his cast, rather, it was about standing up for what was right. The mistreatment of African American women in the entertainment industry, in particular, was a much larger issue. African American women are frequently portrayed in reality TV as either overly dramatic or submissive, and this has long been a problem. What made the LOM cast stand out in this situation was their refusal to tolerate this behavior any longer. The fans of Lamb were not only upset about Carlos King's tweets, but they were also drawing attention to a pattern they had long recognized but had never seen addressed. Additionally, for the first time, the cast was not performing. Their transition from passive participants in the show's drama to active fighters for change struck a deep chord with the fans. The more the women spoke up, the more the fans rallied behind them. They weren't being pitted against each other for entertainment value. Rather, they were using their platform to advocate for themselves and other women like them who had been silenced for too long. Individual women were no longer the focus. Rather, it was about a whole community of viewers who identified with these women. As the fans organized, they escalated their activism beyond social media posts, calling for the network to take a stand, accountability, transparency, and above all, justice for the women who had been treated unfairly. They held virtual rallies, organized online petitions, and even started writing to the network, demanding that Carlos King be. The network responded by acknowledging the controversy and promising to look into it. But this was only the beginning. What's most shocking about this situation is how quickly the entire industry is watching and waiting for the outcome. Carlos King is known as a major player in reality TV, but now his reputation is in jeopardy. The public, the cast, and the fans are all watching. He was held accountable for his actions, and the pressure became so great that he had no choice but to address the situation publicly. It's a high-stakes game, and the consequences could be far-reaching, not just for Carlos, but for the entire reality TV genre. The most bizarre aspect of all of this is the unexpected shift it's created in the reality TV industry. It's not often that a fan base comes together so powerfully to challenge a producer and a network. Fans have made it clear that they will not support Love and Marriage Huntsville in the future if Carlos isn't held accountable for his actions. In the end, this could be the moment that changes how producers, networks, and the entire industry view the women who make these shows successful. What started as a behind-the-scenes feud has now grown into a full-fledged movement for justice. The treatment of women, particularly African-American women in reality TV, has been called into question in ways that have never been done before. The cast and fans alike are now waiting to see what Carlos King will do next in this drama. Will Carlos face the consequences of his actions? When the controversy erupted over Carlos King's treatment of the Love and Marriage Huntsville cast, fans swiftly mobilized to demand justice for the women involved. However, how did the network react to this? We do know that this situation isn't over. It's just getting started, and the outcome will determine whether or not the industry learns from this moment. The network was forced to address the storm, but their response was extremely cautious, leaving many fans to wonder if they were genuinely committed to the cause or just trying to deflect the pressure. At first, Owen's statement was ambiguous and non-committal. They acknowledged the drama surrounding Carlos King and the tension between him and the Alarm cast, but they didn't offer much in the way of action. This is where the story gets even more intense. I must say, this wasn't just about Carlos's actions, it was about a larger issue that had been developing for years: the marginalization of women of color in the reality TV space. The craziest part is that, although the network had the opportunity to take a stand and make a meaningful change, their hesitant response only fueled the anger among fans. Fans quickly pointed out that the network had been silent on matters of race and mistreatment of African American women in the industry for far too long. The community surrounding Love and Marriage Huntsville had been devoted to the show for years, and now they were demanding that the network take responsibility. This wasn't just a small group of viewers anymore, it was a movement. The fans weren't just upset, they were determined that sending out a statement and hoping that the issue would go away wasn't enough. The women of LH were not going to let this slide, and the fans were supporting them. What sets this reality TV controversy apart from others is the degree of fan engagement. Instead of merely discussing the situation, the fans took action, writing letters, starting online petitions, and starting petitions to demand that OWN address their concerns. They made it clear that this wasn't a one-time incident. Rather, it was a turning point for the network, and how they handled it would affect their future. The shocking thing is that OWN's response was to attempt to patch things up without actually addressing it became apparent that the network was trying to downplay the situation rather than confronting it head-on. But it wasn't going to work. This is where destiny took an unexpected turn. The major issue was that they subtly attempted to shift the blame by implying that Carlos King's actions were an isolated incident and that the cast was exaggerating their experiences. Fans were furious by this response, calling it a blatant example of gaslighting. Rugno, they began to hold their own advertisers accountable as well. People started boycotting the company that sponsored Love and Marriage Huntsville because they were sending a clear message that there would be no justice or support. The sponsors were now in the hot seat, and if they didn't take immediate action, they risked losing their money, their audience, and their respect. The most absurd aspect of all of this was that the industry was watching reality TV shows, which have always been known for igniting drama, was changing. The network was unable to ignore the outpouring of support for the women of Lamb. This wasn't just a few individuals grumbling, rather, it was a collective voice calling for change. What's even more startling is that this controversy was starting to affect other networks as well. If O'Brien didn't take a stand, they would risk losing the allegiance of viewers and fans throughout the industry. The fans had spoken and made it clear that they wanted real change, not just words, and that they wanted the network to take responsibility for the mistreatment of African American women in the industry. However, the question remained, would they take action? The answer to that would determine whether or not LH could continue to thrive or if it would lose its place in the hearts of the viewers. Pressure forced Oban to reevaluate their approach because they couldn't afford to just sit back and hope the situation would blow over. Who had watched the show from the start? What's so fascinating about this part of the story is how it sheds light on the power of fans. For a long time, reality TV was controlled by the networks, producers, and personalities involved. However, now that the fans were in charge, they weren't just passive viewers. They were actively influencing the conversation. The industry was realizing that the fans, who frequently felt ignored, now had the ability to make or break a show, and with their unwavering support for the women of Lamb, demonstrated that they were more than just customers. They were change agents. Will they act or risk offending their audience? Will Carlos King face consequences for his conduct, or will he carry on with his business as usual?